Continuing the theme, I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. Helen Keen-Dyer from Central Queensland University and the newly minted Dr. Russell Dippy from Charles Sturt University, who are going to talk about professionalisation of disaster management into the future, higher education as an enabler and advancing professional practice through research. So welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to come and have a chat with you about emergency and disaster management higher education. Before we get started, now have I done that correctly? One more, Helen. That's it, right. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. CQUniversity has been delivering emergency and disaster management qualifications for about 14 years. And as you can imagine, across that time, our curricula has undergone a number of changes and enhancements. But the last 3 to 4 years has seen a significant number of changes, and there's a whole range of drivers behind those changes. For example, historically, our students were small in number. They were domestic students. They were people who were either working or volunteering in an emergency services agency, or they were in a role that was emergency and disaster management related. But as you can see from the slide, we now have a vastly different cohort. We're seeing students from a whole range of course areas looking to undertake emergency and disaster management qualifications and units. And in particular, we see a large body from the public health area. We're also seeing a significant increase in student numbers, and you can see the little asterisk in the table down the bottom. That's where students from other course areas have joined our units, and you can see that's quite a significant difference in the student numbers. Those students, we also now see a large body of international students who are studying full-time. So that's obviously a significant driver for us in terms of our curriculum. In terms of industry and academic drivers, as I'm sure you'll be aware, higher education operates on what we call an inputs-based curriculum. So in the vocational education and training sector, you have the learning and teaching structural scaffolding, so that's the units of competency, the performance criteria. But in the higher education sector, those things aren't pre-prescribed, but they are actually curated and created by the academic and the discipline teams. For some course areas, for example, paramedicine, teaching, engineering, nursing, you've got accrediting bodies, accreditation standards, you have things like capability frameworks or competency frameworks, which really help you to build that structural scaffolding, but also help you to curate that content. In emergency and disaster management in Australia, unlike the US, where they do have some of that structural scaffolding, we don't have that shared, universally accepted body, which means that academic teams are not only creating and curating that learning and teaching structural scaffolding, but are also making active decisions about the content. Within that same period of really rapid change, we've seen some really interesting narratives and reconceptualizations of disaster management, particularly internationally. So through groups such as the FEMA Higher Education Special Interest Group that I participate in, the World Health Organization with the publishing of their Global Competencies and Outcomes Framework, which has emergency management as a practice activity. And then we've also seen other nations such as Canada and the Chief Health Officer put out reports around the nexus between public health and disaster management. So they're all inputs that as academics we have to, synthesise and think about, well, where does that sit in terms of our curriculum? And of course, there's the other driver in the learning and teaching space in more recent years, and that's Mr. Generative AI and how that's fundamentally changed higher education, learning and teaching. So if you say it really quickly, our mission is actually really simple. It's preparing individuals and workforces for a climate-changing world. So say it really quickly, and that doesn't sound too bad. But the environment we operate in is really, really complex. So as we thought about the sheer volume of changes that we made in our curriculum, we decided that we really needed to take a breath, take a minute, and actually do some research around the decisions we make as academics, which obviously has a significant impact on what our students are undertaking, and what are the rationales behind our decisions. So a little bit about our project. So we focused on the 8 core units that are not only taken by our emergency and disaster management students, but students from other course areas. We looked at factors that constrain student engagement in a unit of learning and how we promote student engagement, and we used engagement as an orientating concept because of its link to learning. In phase 1, we focused on academics. What do academics do? It's our decisions that really have a central role in the curriculum, and what are the rationale for those? So being an academic, documents are a pretty important part of what we do and who we are. So documents were our data, and we analysed those thematically for the themes. So what did we find? We found there were 3 key themes. Theme 1 was systems and structures impact learning and teaching. Theme 2 is learning as a shared responsibility. And theme 3, connecting and building connections is imperative. We don't have time today to go into depth into each of the 3 themes, but what I thought I'd do is I'd pick out a couple of the key messages from those themes. So number 1, academics grapple with a range of challenges in service of that mission of educating individuals and workforces for our climate changing world. Systems and structural challenges within and outside academia have a significant impact on what we do. Learning design matters. There's a significant body of literature around the responsibilities of students in learning. And our project absolutely concurs with that. But what we found was that academics have a shared responsibility, and that's not well researched. A responsibility for what we create and what we curate, not just in terms of the content, but in terms of the pedagogies and the practices we use in order to support that learning piece. What are the pedagogies that are central to emergency and disaster management? We don't have signature pedagogies. Our project highlighted that academics have a shared responsibility and that collaboration is absolutely central to that responsibility. Collaboration within academia, so with my institution and the other fellow universities that are here, with the different teams within our universities, with researchers, but also collaboration between academia and the sector. So sector experts, emergency services, governments, stakeholders. It's really important that we stay connected, particularly as we don't have that shared orientating body of capability. Foresight and forethought, and I know foresight was mentioned earlier, it also came up in our project, which is linked to connections and collaborations within and outside of that academic bubble. They're absolutely imperative. And finally, systems, structures, norms and conventions. The way we do things can absolutely enable what we do, but it can constrain what we do. We need to think differently. We need to look at who's doing what, leverage what other areas in higher education are doing to make sure that we're staying contemporary and innovative. So my provocation here today to you, which I'll leave with this group, is how do we support the development of a professional and prepared workforce, and in particular, support the collaboration that we know is absolutely imperative with higher education to achieve our mission, particularly given the constraints and factors today. How does higher education stay connected with the sector, with each other, to ensure that what we are doing is supporting those individuals and workforce for the future? I know time is running out. and I won't go through this slide except to say one of the things we found really interesting was that in the themes, our codes and categories really traversed each of the three themes. There was a lovely kind of intersection between our codes and our categories. What's next? There we go. As I said, this is phase one. This was really drilling into the academics, what they do and why they do it. Phase two will be with our students, trying to get the insights from the students, particularly those that are coming from other course areas. For example, public health. We have a lot of students out of the business area. We've got more professional bodies, such as the engineering professional body, that has indicated that there is a need for disaster management literacies in those professions and disciplines. So the next phase will be with students, and the third phase is we will be back trying to get the insights from this group and others like it, our stakeholders. What is emergency management higher education? How do we do this thing we call higher education? How do we make sure that what we do in our institutions actually meets the needs now and into the future? So thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the opportunity to speak today, I've been asked to cover some of the areas around professionalisation and body of knowledge. So as a little bit of a background, I'm a newer academic, only just got the funny hat. I'm an old crusty copper though that's been doing emergency management for a long time. So it's a matter about bringing those two worlds together and how we're going to do it. So what we do know is a profession has a few dot points it requires to be recognised as a profession, whether it be nursing, law, anything else. And it's no different from emergency management. Now, it's probably not the right environment to speak about reasonable payments, so we'll skip that step. It's an argument with the bosses. But it's that specialised or complex and extensive body of knowledge tied in with that tertiary education. How are we going to go about doing that and building that for the future? So where are we getting it from at the moment? Experience keeps popping up. But what is experience? How do we measure experience? How do we prove that it's valid experience and not just the same mistake that's been repeated? Don't our plans and our planning require some research? How do we get that in there? And I challenge the academics that keep publishing in places that I can't access without a university library login, because as the crusty old copper, I don't have access to the academic library login to see everything that you have generated. So what you have generated to me is wasted because I can't see it. What are we doing about post-event lessons processes? Is this actually applied research? Is this what the IGEM is so good at doing, both here in Victoria and NHRA to a degree as well with their work? What is that transdisciplinary stuff that we're doing? What's coming from other areas of expertise? Our earthquake specialists, because we know that the guy that laid out Christchurch had another job. He laid out Adelaide beforehand. And our numbers aren't quite as bad as Christchurch, but we're the worst set of numbers for the country as far as earthquake risk. So I need to know from an Adelaide point of view a whole heap about earthquake stuff to actually be able to do my plans. What are the human factors or human capacities, which is what my research is focused on? What research can we ask you to do? And more importantly, who are you? Where can I find you? Whatever you is from the academic point of things. I'm that crusty old copper that's sitting there in the background just trying to do it and do the planning. So what's the research environment? Is it human-centred? How do we go through with it? So looking backwards, what can we find? I can tell you what we find is probably not as good as we would like. I tried to create a list of emergency events in Australia, and when I combined multiple databases, it included things like the Bali bombing. My geography is bad, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't in Australia, but it was on a database list of emergency events in Australia. So I'm proposing an emergency management minimum data set. I'd love to speak to some people about what should go on that going forward. What are the lessons we can bring forward from past events? Where do we store it? Where do we share it? The ADA repository has a whole heap of newspaper clippings, but none of the reports. To find the reports that used to be on the old Emergency Fire Services Commissioner of Victoria website that led to the national messaging systems we've got now, I had to do some creative looking back in the internet because the reports were on old web pages that had been taken down. How do we identify the research in those other disciplines that's relevant to us as emergency managers, as we seek to professionalise, seek to be recognised as a profession of emergency management instead of coming from, you started as a copper, you started as a firer, you started as an AMBO or whatever else your starting point was. Nobody manages to leave school and become an emergency manager at the moment because we don't have the systems to support it. So what can we do looking forward? Research, and I've deliberately put POPOSTI up there as some areas of research: people, process, organisation, support, technology. They're actually the elements of capability. That's how we do lessons. Maybe that's how we should actually look at before the event, before we actually start identifying where the problems are. How do we look at higher education? How do we lead into making sure there is consistency? As Helen just pointed out, it's up to the universities to work out what each one is presenting at the moment. Is that the best model for emergency management as a profession in Australia, where I'm just as likely to be moving to Victoria or Queensland to do mutual aid responses from South Australia as I am from anywhere else? And what's those linkages, again, between higher education and practitioners? How do we share it? How do we get it around? How do we actually think about all of our recovery environments? And they're listed there. And better still, how do we do ourselves out of a job? I'd be really, really happy if I didn't have to actually manage response to an emergency because the community actually knew how to go with it. And to keep the countdown going to the 1 minute, because my time has just come up. So I would love to get any questions or thoughts. The email is there, the QR code, because everyone loves a good QR code post-COVID, is to my LinkedIn profile. There is a whole heap coming up in Australian Journal of Emergency Management, which is an open source document, so all of the practitioners can get to it, to actually share the information and what's come out of it. But happy to take any questions. Thank you.
We've probably got time for one quick question, and thank you, Russell and Helen. The session's generated a lot of questions and also some suggestions for how the sector could engage and inform some of the work that you're doing. I don't know whether it's a wicked question or not. How do we get DM recognised as an occupation formally to provide a foundational education structure? Either of you got any ideas?
So the first stage of that is emergency management has just been put into the Australian Bureau of Statistics occupation codes. Through the Australasian Institute of Emergency Services, of which I'm a member, there's been a bit of work at getting that recognised, just to take it away from fire officer and police officer. So we've got one statistical occupational code that is in there now. We probably need to work on that, but you've got to eat your elephant one bite at a time. We've got some recognition in there. Now it's all these other things for the profession. If we can work on them in parallel, not one at a time, I think we'll keep building on it. Helen?
Thank you. As many of you will know, I started my professional career as a paramedic, and in those days we weren't a registered profession, and I had the opportunity to be involved in Queensland's contribution to that national scheme. So really it's that driver. We need that kind of orientating and driving professional body to try and pull those pieces together, the codes of ethics, the body of knowledge in terms of the capabilities, all of the pieces Russell identified before. And it really needs that centralised group who then are the owners and drivers who can, coordinate that piece. It takes a long time if the paramedic example is anything to go by, a bit like teaching nursing, but we need to get started if that's the direction that we are wanting to go in.